Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second season of HSBC presents CNBC-TV18 Future.Female.Forward, the Women's Collective, co-presented by HCL Tech. Please put your hands together for your host, Shivani Bazaz.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first ever College Connect program as part of the HSBC Presents CNBC-TV18 Future.Female.Forward, the Women's Collective, co-presented by HCL Tech in association with ITC, FedEx, Reliance Industries Limited, and industry partner FICCI. It's an honor to kick off the College Connect program at the prestigious campus of IIT Delhi. It's like we are assembling the Avengers of business and tech world, but with a whole lot less spandex and more power suits. On a serious note, Future Female Forward isn't just a catchy slogan. It's an initiative that has been launched with a purpose, with the intent to create a remarkable difference, ensuring gender parity becomes an absolute reality. We have been celebrating and empowering women achievers across the nation since its inception in 2022, from the boardrooms to the startup garage. We have facilitated incredible women achievers, hosted inspiring talks, and been the cheerleaders for women taking on the world. And today, we are bringing the charade to IIT Delhi. We couldn't have done this without the incredible support of the team at IIT Delhi, so a big shout out to Mr. Rangan Banerjee, Director of IIT Delhi, Professor Anjali Multani, Dean ODI, Professor Subodh Sharma, Associate Dean Academic Outreach and New Initiatives, and Professor Neerath Ray, Assistant Professor in the Department of Material Science and Engineering at IIT Delhi, for making this happen. Dear guests, please do participate through the course of the conversation, as we will open the floor for Ask Me Anything session at the end of each chat. Now, let's get this lovely afternoon brightened up further. I'm beyond excited to invite our fearless leader, the powerhouse behind Future Female Forward, Ms. Shireen Bhan, Managing Editor of CNBC-TV18, for an enlightening opening address. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Shireen Bhan.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, thank you to the entire team at IIT Delhi for giving us this opportunity to take the first Campus Connect program outside of our studios and outside of what we've been doing to engage with the youth. It has been a long time since I've been on a college campus, and I have to say, it does feel good. I can feel the collective energy of thousands of dreamers, doers, and achievers, and it is infectious and electrifying. It feels particularly nice to be here at IIT Delhi. I would never have made it here, given my fatal fear of math. I was lucky to have made it to St. Stephen's College, though, where I got a glimpse of how competitive the real world is. I also realized early on that if you try too hard to fit in, you will lose your ability to stand out. So following the herd is a sure, short way to kill new ideas. To imagine a life of limitless possibilities is the beauty and the power of youth. But unfortunately, the privilege to dream is often constrained and shackled by our circumstances. There is no equal opportunity, no level playing field, with caste, class, and access to capital being key factors that often shape our aspirations. The barriers to succeed are even higher for women, given the societal construct and the entrenched patriarchy that forces women to shrink their dreams and their experiences. But if there is one thing that I have learned over the years through my own experience and listening to some of the most celebrated leaders in the world, is not to be a prisoner to our circumstances. It is not easy, and it requires an immense amount of conviction, courage, and commitment. The greatest disservice we can do is not to try, especially as women. We have to push boundaries, we have to challenge the status quo, and we have to rein in our fears to make a life of our choosing. If we are lucky, we will find support, encouragement, and love along the way. But if not, make the journey by yourself. It will still be far better than living a half-life of unmet expectations and stillborn dreams. But change is not by accident. As Einstein said, to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result is insanity. And I'm so glad that IITs across the country and the government have chosen to fix the glaring gap between female and male representation by taking tangible steps which have resulted in meaningful change. I believe for the academic session of 2022-2023, a total of 3,310 women, constituting 20% of the total seats available, have been giving admissions across the 23 IITs. So a big round of applause for the change that has been made and the change that is very visible here in this auditorium as well. But the battle, ladies and gentlemen, doesn't end here. We have to improve the participation of women in the labor force. While we are still well below the global average of 50% plus, the female labor force participation rate has fortunately risen in the past 6 years from about 23% in 2017-2018 to about 37% in 2022-23, driven mainly by the rising participation of rural women in the economy, as per the economic survey just released. Future Female Forward is not just about mainstreaming the conversation on why gender parity matters, why it should matter to you and me. It's also about better representation of women. As I heard someone say, women are either boxed into two roles, victims or villains. But we are so much more. We can create history like Manu Bhaker has just done at the Olympics. We can challenge the stereotype like the Egyptian fencer Nada Hafiz, who completed the fencing round while being 7 months pregnant, or Simone Biles, who, while acknowledging her mental health battle, has 9 Olympic medals, 6 of them gold. So let me end with the philosopher Aristotle, who said, excellence is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. Choice, not chance, determines your destiny. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, many thanks for joining us here today. We have a power-packed lineup of speakers, many of whom have started, like you, their careers, their journeys at different IIT campuses across the country and have gone on to build on their dreams, build on their aspirations. You will hear from them shortly, and we do hope that you will engage with them. Use this opportunity to ask your questions if you have any, or at least absorb their energy and give more power to your dreams. Once again, thank you very much for being here this afternoon.
Thank you, Shireen. Your insights have actually set the perfect tone for the afternoon, underscoring the importance of inclusivity and equality in every sphere of life. You know, we all know that IITians are always providing engineering solutions, but maybe it's time we engineer a way to bridge the gender gap too. On that note, I'm delighted to introduce our distinguished keynote speaker, Mr. Hitendra D, the CEO of HSBC India. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Hitendra D to the stage.
Well, it's never easy to follow after Shireen to give any lecture, any address at all. So if there is, since I'm here to share my experience and my knowledge, one thing is next time, please don't follow in her footsteps when you have to give the opening remarks or address. Listen, I think Shireen mentioned she got into Stephens, and I mentioned to the dean here, even if I had tried all the way from my time when I was that age to now, I would not have gotten here. So congratulations to all of you. I really hope you will do justice to some of the great things that you had. I'm sure you worked very, very hard, slogged your butt off to be here. So now just make sure that you use these 3-4 years to fulfill the larger dreams, right? So I think maybe I'll just start with some opening comments, talk a little bit about what we are doing here, on the Female Future First agenda, and then to the extent that it's relevant, share maybe a little bit of my learnings through my career. So first, I think I want to tell you that, listen, you guys are the luckiest crop that's born in India since 1947, right? I mean, by all accounts, the next 25, 30 years, which will be bulk of your working years, right? Whether as entrepreneurs, professionals, family business, whatever you join, by any metric, you people will have the best run of any of the people who have graduated from this campus since the campus started. So just that context is relevant, that as Warren Buffett says, the newest crop that is born in US is always the luckiest crop. And the same thing I'd like to sort of mention to you, that make the most of it, right? Make the most of the wonderful opportunity you have through the hard work you've done, got here, and then what lies ahead for you. I think just I'm trying to mix up what I have. I think success generally I have seen comes to those who want it the most. Okay, so to the extent you can, the hunger you had when you were giving your test and your group discussion and your interviews, try and keep that hunger. You see some of the really fantastic leaders around the world, politics, sports, business, wherever. The one thing that differentiates them typically is whatever their age, whatever their stage, whatever the amount of wealth they have, whatever the number of success parameters, they tend to be hungrier than the other fellow. And that's partly natural, but it can also, you can train yourself to remain constantly hungry, because they will, otherwise somebody will eat your lunch, right? That's just the practical part of life. So I think try and retain that hunger that got you here. And the other thing I've seen is generally opportunities come to those who are prepared for it the most, right? I mean, all of us think of why has the opportunity not come to it, but I mean, I'm sure you'll hear from wonderful people after me in the next 2 hours or so, but generally speaking, the ones who are, opportunities come to those a lot more who are prepared for it, as opposed to just hope for it to land up at their door. I think, I'm sure this IIT has thrown up a number of entrepreneurs, right? So to the extent that you have an entrepreneurial streak inside you, please keep that fire alive, okay? Just don't do what I have done, which is do the humdrum thing, join an organization, grow through the ranks. And yes, some are successful, some are not. But the country really, really needs entrepreneurs right now, right? It needs people who will create employment, who will create wealth, and light up other ideas in other younger people. So, and not everybody is fit for it, and I'm sure you're going to hear some of the entrepreneurs in this group. But if you have it, then don't take the safer option, right? To go for it. The environment is as good as it's been, but it'll be a very, very tough. You want the easy option? Follow my path, right? You want a difficult journey for the first 10, 15 years. Then follow in the footsteps of the entrepreneurs. Okay, just coming to the subject, female. Hello. Okay, I'll carry on anyway. So I think this is really our opportunity. You get a privilege. Yeah? It's a privilege to be the CEO of a large international bank in India. Whichever way you work very hard and you compete and you do some good work and your work is recognized. But at the end of the day, it's a great privilege, and with that privilege comes great responsibility. Separates the really good from the from the normal leaders, right? I mean, I think if you can keep your humility. The third thing I'm just going to say is, at least my experience, again, the nature of the business that I'm responsible for is also, at the end of the day, life is about relationships that you've built, okay? The friendships that you will all build here and maintain, the friendships you will make in your office place, the people that you will, you know, I think that people who are, you know, who are prepared for the lucky breaks, people who retain their humility, and people who really invest in relationships in a genuine, people can see through whether you genuinely are or you faking a laugh, right? People can make out or something like that. So if you're seen to be a relationship manager, that's, I mean, genuine relationship. So that's what I've learned. That's what I try to do. I hope you guys will do, like I said, a wonderful, you'll have a wonderful career. You will get equal opportunities everywhere. Many of you will become entrepreneurs, and hopefully some of the talks that you'll hear in the next hour and a half will help a little bit, a very, very little bit, towards the great journey that awaits you all. So with that, I'll sort of hand it over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dave. Moving on, as we gather here for the exciting College Connect program, we're about to hear from someone who's not just a leader, but a true innovator in the world of academia. Please join me in welcoming Dean ODI, Professor Anjali Multani. Let's give her a warm round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Multani.
Hi, my name is Anjali, and this is a much fancier version of the hall that I am used to seeing. So welcome all of you. Thank you for joining us here. A little bit of introduction. My name is Anjali Multani. I'm a professor of literature here, as well as the Dean of Diversity and Inclusion at IIT Delhi. So I was asked to give a small introduction to what we do at Diversity and Inclusion. Some of you may have heard the term from American universities. We do something a little bit differently here. This was started about 2 years ago in a formal way. The verticals that come under diversity and inclusion actually existed in IIT before the office was set up. We have 4 verticals. One is the Office of Accessible Education, and I do hope all the entrepreneurs and employers are listening closely. In Office of Accessible Education, we provide teaching aids and supports to our students with disability. We also make a special effort to make them industry ready with special training and skill programs, software, coding, and so on. We have an initiative for caste equity, which is called ICE, better connotation of the term ICE here than in the United States. In ICE, we work mostly with students from the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and OBC categories. And again, this is advocacy, sensitization, outreach. We have IGES, which is the vertical that we are most concerned with here today, which is the Initiative for Gender Equity and Sensitization. And I'll be speaking a little bit more about that in detail in 1 second. And the last but not the least vertical is, I think, the most radical in many ways. And this is certainly the one that gets us into a lot of trouble amongst other educational institutions. This is called Indradhanu, and this is the LGBTQ plus collective at IIT Delhi. So we are really super glad to see an event like this on Females Forward being taken up by a mainstream media channel such as CNBC-TV18. It is very, very heartening to see such huge stakeholders in business, media, tech, everywhere actually walking the walk on mainstreaming the importance of gender equity in society. Like many other STEM institutions all over the world, IIT Delhi has historically struggled with a gender balance in the classroom, both in terms of student enrollment as well as female faculty. For many years now, there has been a conscious effort to address this imbalance, as Shireen was saying. And so the idea of creating what we call supernumerary seats for female students at the undergraduate level was taken up by all IITs about, I think it was roughly 2017. Thanks to this and other efforts, such as special counseling for JEE students and their families, we have managed to achieve a reasonable gender balance among students. It's still not ideal at the undergrad level, but there are other issues, including social and primary and secondary education priorities, that affect this. One of the most important changes we can effect in society is to create and sustain aspirational role models for young girls and women. As Shireen had said already, entire families and ecosystems must see and understand the value of education and equal opportunities for women. Indeed, talent is everywhere and is gender blind, but opportunity certainly is not. It is our job collectively as leaders of academia, the business world, tech, whatever, successful people in our own right, to take this forward and to ensure that talented young girls and women do not lose opportunities to shine simply because of their gender. We take equity very, very seriously on this campus. Equity and diversity means creativity, means respect and out-of-the-box thinking. The speakers on the stage at IIT today do not represent a narrow future for STEM students, but perhaps many possibilities, many diverse futures. Ideally, we would like all students not to be prisoners of the past, of expectations or stereotypes, but to be completely free, free to learn, to laugh, and to live. Once again, thank you very much, CNBC-18, for doing this event, and thank you all for joining us here.
Thank you, Professor Multani, for the truly engaging and inspiring talk. It was really like getting the front row seat to the masterclass of navigating academia and innovation, of course, minus the homework and pop quizzes. Now, get ready to be inspired as we dive into an incredible TED Talk with someone who's truly championing change in the world of gender equality. Please join me in welcoming Pooja Sharma Goyal, CEO of the Udayati Foundation, who, by the way, is also an IIT Delhi alumna. When it comes to building a gender-equal future, Pooja is like the ultimate tech wizard. If there were an app for equality, I'm sure you'll be the one coding it. She's here to show you how to conquer the road to parity with a dash of passion and a sprinkle of brilliance. Please welcome Pooja Sharma Goyal.
Thank you so much, Shivani. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you today. A big thank you, deepest thank you to Shireen and Future.Female.Forward to invite me to this very special place. And I'll tell you in a moment why this is so special. During my IIT days, I did everything else but study chemical engineering. So I have very fond memories of spending a lot of time here in the SEM hall, engaging in debates, singing in music nights, performing in dramas, choreography. And it did seem like a waste of time at that time, but like Mr. Dave said, enjoy it. That is what I remember, and those relationships and the friendships are the biggest takeaway from those 4 formative years. I also met my one and only husband here on campus. My father-in-law was a professor of physics at IIT Delhi who I deeply respected. And for someone like me, who was a first-generation professional degree in our family, nobody had ever gone for any undergraduate degree, these 4 years were just life-changing, and they changed the course of my life. And I'm sure they will change the course of your life. 2 years ago, I was sitting in this very same hall with almost 100 of my friends and batchmates from all across the world, because we were here for our 25-year reunion. And in between all the banter and the leg pulling, there was also a discussion about how the career trajectories of men have shaped very differently from the women. We were, I think, 13 women in our batch. And pretty much all of my women friends had powerful stories to tell. After that, actually, we ended up doing a retreat of women who graduated from 1990 to 2000, and about 35 of us got together for a weekend in Athens for a very special time. And we really talked about what can we do now at this stage of our careers and lives to really be there for the current students and the current crop of students. So So again, deeply thankful to Shireen and Future Female Forward for really doing it at a campus level. So coming back to this idea of career trajectories, right? Just this morning, the Dairo, Professor Rao, shared on LinkedIn that IIT Delhi has the highest number of founders who are unicorn builders and soonicorn builders, about 53 of them. And if you expand that list to Bay Area and across the world, that number is much larger. But of course, it was conspicuous by its absence of female founders. There was one name, Ruchi Kalra, there. And kind of that got me thinking again on why does that happen. And I think it boils down to career trajectories. Women's career trajectories are fundamentally different from men's. Pretty much if I now look at my peer set of leaders, women on an average end up moving in and out of their professional careers at least 3 times or more. Whereas our professional, our workplaces are designed for men, by men, to be this mode where you get out of college and you start climbing that ladder and you do it over 30 years, reach a leadership position, get to boards. And if you take a break in the middle, God forbid, that is a big penalty, both for men and for women. But for women, it ends up even much more. A lot of women are not able to come back from their breaks, and largely those are for caregiving reasons, among others. So now, as our lifespans are increasing, we are talking about 100-year lifespans. I'm sure you've all read Outlive, David Sinclair's work, Lifespan. And our professional journeys are extending to 75 years, and women anyway live longer. Is there an opportunity to redefine how we look at these career trajectories? Can we not extend it to from this 30-year to 50-year, where women can come back into the workplace at 40, and between 40 to 60, 65, there is still a 30-year runway to get to leadership positions, to do what a leader, a person on the board would do. So I think the time is right now to really think about how we significantly redesign the workplaces versus having all our interventions focused on women. If you can't, if you're not getting a board seat, if you're not getting a voice, learn conflict management, negotiation, etc. But I think there is a need to fundamentally think about the redesign of workplaces, and many companies are leading the charter there in terms of redefining processes, thinking deeply about it. I've so far just talked about anecdotes and stories, but let me share some data with you. At IIT Foundation, the organization I lead, we analyzed data from the top 2,000 NSC-listed companies, their annual data from their annual report and BRSR report, and created a dashboard that covers about 23 sectors. And guess what we found? Any guesses on the women's representation in those top 2,000 companies? Any guesses? Wild guesses? 30%? 40%? 10%? 19%. So you're at 19%. And if you look at the top 5 sectors like health, IT, consumer services, banking, they have numbers at 41%, 47%, 41%, 37%, and 28%. Beyond that, there is a long tail of almost 20 sectors which are at single-digit women's representation. So at IIT, we've launched a program which we call Close the Gender Gap 30 by 30, which is getting to 30% women's representation in these top 2,000 companies by 2030. So as Shireen said, thank you. As Shireen said, the number has gone up to 37%, and that's driven by rural, agricultural workforce women joining workforce there. But when it comes to salaried women, waged women, even in the informal workforce in urban areas, that number is very, very low still. So if India now has to realize our dream of becoming this $10 trillion economy in the next 10 years, we just cannot afford to leave this large reservoir of talent behind. We need to redesign our processes, our mindsets, our workplaces to take advantage of this talent pool that's ready and raring to go. Any comparable economy, be it Indonesia, Philippines, China, Korea, we've seen as the GDP per capita has gone up, their female labor force participation rate has gone up. In India, for some reason, that's still not happened. And by the way, that is despite entrenched patriarchal norms there as well. So there is something that we need to do to redefine this narrative, the workplaces, to really see that our female labor force participation rate can go above 50%. The average in the world is at 53%, by the way. This is not something that a one person, one company, one sector can do. We need to come together as media, academia, private sector, government, to really dismantle these entrenched barriers. And the time is now. There is so much forward momentum right now, and you probably hear it all the time with the top leaders in the country talking about women-led development, Nari Shakti, Sashakt Nari, Sashakt Bharat. And I think that is why the time is now to really do something to move the needle on the ground and work towards the goal of this $10 trillion economy, but with 50% gender parity. Let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pooja. It was really a great ride. As I said, it's clear that if gender equality were a coding challenge, she'd be the one who'd already debugged all the issues and launched a perfect version. Don't mind my tech jokes, you guys. Now, if you have any questions, you can raise your hands and we'll get the mic to you. Anybody? Okay, up next, let's welcome an innovator who has changed the way we take care of ourselves and our homes. He's someone who's revolutionizing the gig economy, the urban company way. Let's welcome Abhiraj Singh Bhal, co-founder and CEO of the Urban Company. Ladies and gentlemen, please give Abhiraj a huge round of applause.
It is now time to kickstart our conversations. Pooja did a great job to set the context on why it is important for all of us as stakeholders to do a lot more to ensure that we do mind the gap, we bridge the gap. And I think Abhiraj and Urban Company are certainly trying to do that in their way, and you'll hear about that in just a second. But Abhiraj, before I talk to you about what you're doing as far as your female partners are concerned and what the targets and the aspirations are there, let's take you back to your days at IIT Kanpur. Did you imagine yourself as an entrepreneur? Was that something that you had even considered while you were on campus?
Yes.
You had?
Yes.
There was a long pause before you said yes.
Yeah. Naveen Tiwari, who started InMobi,
Yes.
used to be called M-Coach when he started it.
Yes.
When I was in 4th year, he had come to our campus and he had given a talk. And here was a guy who had graduated from IIT Kanpur, gone to McKinsey, then Harvard Business School, had a job at Charles River Ventures, and then quit all of that to come back to India. In 2008, it wasn't very fashionable to start a company. And I remember briefly interacting with him, and I told him this many years later. And I said, listen, if this guy can do it, so can I. And I'm sure a lot of my batchmates say that about me today. That, if this guy could do it, so can we. But it's, I think it's not as hard as it seems to be. Let me say that out loud. Yes, I think you have to take the first step, and then you have to believe, and then you have to keep walking that path. And it takes a little bit of courage, it takes a lot of persistence, but it's not as hard as it's made out to be. And you know, I graduated middle of my class at IIT Kanpur. Nothing great to talk home about. I don't think anybody expected me to go on to do great things. And I can say that about just sort of about myself, that, you know, if I could build Urban Company, I think any of you can as well.
Well, I don't know, but, you know, you just gave us that story about how Naveen inspired you. I think many people, women and men sitting in this room, the students sitting in this room, might walk away with their inspirational moment at the end of this conversation, Abhiraj. But I want to take, so. I certainly hope so. But I want to take you back to 2014. As you pointed out that, you know, you passed out, you decided to go to BCG, IIM Ahmedabad, the detour, and then to BCG, and you had a comfortable, cushy life. The decision to actually start up in 2014, and you had the good fortune of meeting people that you enjoyed being with, and you continue to enjoy working with. What gave you the conviction that Urban Clap was what it used to be before it became Urban Company, that would work as a service in India?
So I say the decision to quit BCG was, you know, even though I was having a lot of fun at the firm, I kind of knew pretty much throughout the 3 years that I spent at BCG that I would want to eventually start out on my own. And I had the good fortune of partnering with my IIT Kanpur batchmate Varun. And, you know, throughout those 3 years, we were having our flirtations with entrepreneurship, you know, weekend conversations, meeting entrepreneurs. Eventually, we gathered enough courage to take the plunge, and that's what it boils down to. You know, all of us will give ourselves a lot of reasons as to why we're not doing it. You know, we don't have the right idea, we don't have enough capital saved, we don't have enough, you know, now is not the right time, etc., etc. We don't have enough experience. But at some point, you know, you get to a point where you face the truth, and the truth is that you don't have enough courage. That's what I told myself, right? I said, at least let me stop lying to myself. The reality of why I am not starting out is because I have a nice job. I have a paycheck that hits the bank account. It is not about an idea, because today I work 14 hours a day for someone else. When I start thinking about ideas 14 hours a day and there's no paycheck that's going to hit the bank account at the end of the month, in 2 months the idea will come, right? So I think once I got to that point, things became easier. Decision making became clearer. We had a failed startup to start with. So Urban Clap back then was not our first idea. But in the meandering process after that first failed startup, where we were interacting with a lot of consumers, with a lot of service professionals, we just felt that, you know, this gigantic space of home and local services, which is so unorganized, it's bound to get organized. It's bound to get disrupted by technology. It's bound to move online. I just couldn't see a world back in 2014 where, say, 10 years later or 15 years later, you know, you were ordering your mobile phone online, your grocery online, your food online, but when it came to getting your plumbing service done or your cleaning service done, you were still going to the, you know, local guard and asking them for a sort of recommendation. So that was the genesis.
Well, you know, and I have to say that it has today, I think it's the go-to option for just about everybody, at least in the large cities that we live in. But, you know, I want to go back to something that you said. You said that this wasn't your first venture. You did have a failed startup. And I think it was Paulo Coelho who said that, you know, making a mistake is fine. Repeating the same mistake is a choice. And I want to understand from you, what was the big lesson that you learned from that failed venture that you internalized that has now given you the sort of courage to take Urban Company forward? And what did you change about the way that you then went on to build Urban Company on the back of that lesson learned? I'd
say two lessons. One is that failure is a a possibility. And up until then, while I had seen small failures in life, I hadn't seen failure to that degree. So just the reality of how competitive and brutal the marketplace can be, and the fact that you have a fancy degree and you have fancy work experience, really, I mean, the consumer doesn't care. The consumer cares whether you've created something of value to them or not. So I think it was a good reality check. But the second more important point is, failure should not be feared. There has to be, even in entrepreneurship, which has so much seeped in optimism, there has to be an objectivity around looking at a situation for what it is and saying, okay, we've tried, this isn't working. Do we have the ability to step back and try something else? And we failed multiple times along the way at Urban Company as well. But, it doesn't matter, because you try and take 10 shots at the goal and 8 won't go in. But the 2 that do more than make up for everything else. So it's something I tell my team as well, that if we're succeeding more often than we're failing, in all likelihood, our bets are very deterministic and not very probabilistic. And deterministic bets will only take us that far.
Well, you were talking about your team, and I remember that you said when you were building out Urban Company, and it's 10 years on now, that you wanted to build a culture that was fair, with a great degree of ownership. And I relate to that because that is exactly how we've run our newsroom at CNBC-TV18. But why was it so important for you to have these 2 pillars drive culture at Urban Company, a sense of ownership as well as fairness?
I think fairness, to me, is a very, very important fundamental value system. I was fortunate enough to grow up in a family where, both me and my sister were treated equally and fairly. There was never any differentiation, and I grew up in an armed forces environment. So I saw essentially a high degree of fairness and almost uniformity around me. And somewhere that got seeped in as a value system that, life may not have dealt the same cards to every individual, but at the basic level, every individual deserves to be treated fairly. And in organizations that, many organizations, we all say that, but it can be hard. If you don't review your compensation systems, for example, with a lot of science, you will not realize that unfairness is seeped in there, for example. Ownership, for the brief period of 3 years when I worked for someone else, I truly enjoyed the time when I was left on my own, when I was charting my own course. There was nobody micromanaging me. And I also had the other type of bosses who were micromanagers and sort of, looking over and watching over my back. And I just realized that, individuals do their best work when they feel like they're owners of their destiny. They're not following tasks, right? That's when they go above and beyond. And if you want a culture where people are going above and beyond, you've got to set guardrails, but then you've got to let them be. You've got to let them take risks. You've got to let them own the outcome rather than own the process. And that has, again, been something very, 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 very central to the way we have built Urban Company.
Speaking of building Urban Company, and Pooja was talking about the need to rethink, reimagine our workplaces. And, Urban Company and a lot of the companies working as part of the gig economy have tried to do exactly that. I want you to comment on what investor Naval Ravikant said, that over the next 50 years, we're all going to be working for ourselves. I mean, that's the gig economy on steroids, right? So, what kind of headroom for growth do you see? What kind of disruption do you believe the gig economy is going to bring about? And how do you prepare yourself and the company for that?
Yeah, I think the gig economy today is still very much in its nascent stages and infancy, and there are probably 2 or 3 sectors that have grown rapidly, and all kind of delivery services at home and home services are very much part of it. But over a period of time, what's going to happen, essentially, the difference between the gig economy and the more traditional form of employment is that here you're getting paid per gig, per job. And I think that's going to be a mode of livelihood with the internet becoming a more central part of our lives. That's going to impact many, many more sectors in the next 10, 20 years. So I certainly agree with, in broad philosophy with Naval Ravikant, that the secular trend is that many more people will eventually find themselves working for themselves, and perhaps not just in one profession, but in 2 professions or 3 professions, because they have varied interests. And if internet platforms allow for that to happen, then that is certainly something that we will see much more of. That said, you know, one needs to keep in mind that just like a formal employer will enable their employees to succeed, just because you're a gig platform, it doesn't absolve you of that responsibility. So you still have to enable your gig workers to succeed, which means you need to make sure that they are paid fairly and they're paid in time, they make a decent middle-class wage, and they have respect in society. You need to make sure they're trained, and you invest in their training so that they can make the transition from being an informal, unorganized worker to a formal, organized worker. You need to make sure they have the right tools so that they're productive and they're spending their time wisely. You need to make sure that they have a social security net in terms of insurances, life, accident, health. They have access to formal credit. So essentially what you're trying to do is enable this individual who has a lot of potential and a lot of aspiration, but otherwise is perhaps part of the informal, unorganized ecosystem, to become part of sort of the promise of India, of a middle-class, respectable, decent livelihood.
You know, I want to go back to the emphasis on bringing women onto the platform, and that's what Urban Company has tried to do. You've also spent a fair amount of your money in upskilling, in training, not just the male partners, but also the female partners, and the focus has been on upskilling female partners as well. When did you decide that you wanted to prioritize this, or when did you decide that you wanted to make this a focus area, that you wanted to bring more women on? You know, was it a deliberate, conscious effort on your part? And does this go back to your own upbringing, where you said that, you know, and I'm an Air Force officer's daughter as well, so I know exactly what you mean. We didn't grow up feeling like we were treated any differently on account of our gender. Does it go back to the way that you were brought up?
I think it certainly does. You know, in my school, for example, which was the Naval Public School, I think the gender ratio was pretty much 50-50. And then I found myself in IIT Kanpur, where my class of 528 something students had 29 girls. It was just a very, very stark, you know, difference. Look, let me first speak as an entrepreneur and not as somebody who's trying to do the right thing, right? As an entrepreneur, you want to enable equal participation of women both in your companies as well as in your gig workforce, first and fundamentally for the reason that it is not charity that you're doing.
No.
It is actually very, very logical and sensible from a business build standpoint. Women make the vast majority of consumer decisions. When it comes to home services, for example, 80% of all home service buying decisions are made by women.
Yeah.
So if you do not have at least 40 to 50% representation in your organization, you're not going to be able to make those right calls in terms of what offering to have and how to serve your women customers, simply because you're not going to be able to empathize enough with the needs of your consumer. Secondly, in terms of the workforce that we have, the gig workforce, the reality is that for a lot of the services that we offer to these women, you know, women prefer other women coming in. Whether it's beauty services, massage services. In fact, we have now seen, as we have started to make a thrust in non-traditional service sectors like appliance repair, electricians and painting to also have women, that it actually is a woman plumber or a woman RO technician walking in comes naturally with a lot more trust to the end consumer. So purely as an entrepreneur, this makes a lot of business sense and business rationale. The second thing is obviously you want to also have a workplace that is going beyond just serving its business needs to the tilt. You also want to create the right example and you want to do the right thing. And so very early on, we set ourselves the goals of making sure that both in the gig force that we have as well as in our own full-time workforce, there is ample participation from women. We haven't reached the place where we would like to reach.
Where are you currently at?
So our gig workforce is 36% women. Our internal team is a little over 37%. But the right number that we also track is women in leadership roles. And that is unfortunately still at 24%. And that's one number that we have internally, Bhavya sitting here, we've taken the target of taking that number to 40% over the next 3 years. And a large part of that, the speaker before me spoke about, gaps in the career trajectory and enabling that. We've realized that if we don't do that, we don't support women through those gaps, then we will not create a workplace that will over time retain women. So whether that is, support systems to go on maternity breaks or otherwise, support systems for them to come back, a creche, is a law in the land that if you have an organization of more than 50 people, you need to have a creche. But very few companies actually have that. We recently opened a creche in our office. These are small things, they go a very, very long way in signaling to your workforce that you're there and you're trying earnestly to be inclusive of all the different needs that they have.
I'm glad that you emphasize the point that it's not just the right thing to do, it is the right business thing to do. You are addressing women consumers, and why would you not have women in the workforce? Why would you not have women in the boardroom as decision makers when you hope to capture a large majority of your customer base, which happens to be women as well? So you're right about that. But what I want to understand from you, is there an opportunity there in what you just said? And this is something that I think the latest economic survey also highlights, the need for the care economy to sort of become much more accessible, democratizing the care economy. Is that an opportunity, a business opportunity that you would consider in the future?
Most certainly. I think what's happening is that the generation of today, which is in the workplace, and basically my generation and the next generation, unlike the previous generation, which had the time and the energy to take care of their elders, I suspect that as this generation grows older and their parents grow older, they will not they'll have the money and the resources, but they will not have the time to essentially take care of their elderly people. And we in India come from a value system where we don't just leave our parents, right? We feel a deep sense of responsibility to take care of them in their old age. I think there will be this opportunity for a caregiving ecosystem to emerge, whether it's elderly care, childcare, etc., etc. And today that's completely unorganized. It's completely, fragmented. I think we certainly at Urban Company could play a role there. Our vision is to organize any and every service that can be rendered in your home. So this is very much sort of in that playing field.
Okay, since we're talking about the playing field, now let's understand for you what the aspiration is. In terms of milestones that have already been achieved, what are you proudest of? What are the targets that you're setting for Urban Company going forward? And more importantly, are you also looking at IPOing in the near future? How are you preparing yourself for that financial eventuality?
Yeah, I'm proudest of just surviving. I think 10 years and still going strong, and proudest of sort of, I'd say, feeling like, it is in many ways, it's not lost on me that it is a privilege to be in the shoes that I have today. We have a huge opportunity ahead of us. India is a growing country. We really think we haven't accomplished much, and we're just getting started. And as old as I might look, I'm only 38. So I feel like I have...
You don't look that old at all, Abhirat.
I feel like I have another 20, 25 years at least to keep running. So I think it was helpful to start early, right? I was 28 when I started. So I think I think there's a lot for us to accomplish. IPO is important, but what follows going public is more important, which is to operate as a trustworthy, high-quality, publicly listed entity. I think the IPO will happen in due course, whether it's 1 year from now, 1.5 years from now. I can't really sort of put a finger on it today, but it's in that zip code. But more importantly, I think for us, we really look at the next 10, 15 years. We feel like we can create a very important company, more importantly, an institution that creates large-scale impact for India. And in that pursuit, I think we're only really just getting started.
Only just getting started. So, what could the next destination be? I mean, you've got a target for the next 10 to 15 years, which is much more aspirational. But what is the more achievable target in the near term? What's the next destination as far as Urban Company is concerned?
So I think today we are present in about 60-odd cities. And we have around 50,000 gig workers on our platform. All of them are trained, highly specialized, hand-picked. But if you look at India and you look at the services we operate in, that number runs in the millions, perhaps even more than 10 million. So in some sense, despite the early success that we have seen, we haven't really made a dent. And our first goal that we talk about internally is 500,000 service partners on the platform, including 200,000 women partners. I think that is a goal that we would like to accomplish sooner rather than later. Whether it takes 5 years or 6 years or 7 years, only time will tell. But that's something that we want to run towards. And for that, one needs to build capability. Whether it's training infrastructure, technology capabilities, the ability to just work with such a large workforce. I think that's really the next frontier for us. If we are able to bring those many people onto the platform, have them upskilled, enable them and empower them to do better, the consumer demand is there. Consumers are looking for these services, and that's only going to grow. So the onus is on us to make that happen.
And the path to profitability?
We are profitable today at a PAT level. This quarter that just went by, we turned fully profitable as a consolidated entity at a PAT level. So I'm glad that I no longer have to define these paths that I have been defining for the last 10 years. It's now a path to increasing profits, which hopefully will follow. But we also want to make sure that as we become more profitable, our gig workers also continue to see an improvement in their earnings and improvement in their station in life, so that it's a real win-win that we are creating for all our stakeholders.
And that win-win is what has driven the ESOP program as well at Urban Company, yes. Right?
Absolutely. We have been, we have a very broad-based ESOP program. It was started right when the company got incorporated. Till date, we have awarded ESOPs to over 1,000 employees. And we have facilitated 6 rounds of secondary transactions. In India, there is often this notion that ESOPs don't have much value. They're just paper money. In the last 10 years, we have facilitated 6 rounds of secondary liquidity or secondary transactions for our employees. The most recent one, where over 500 employees and ex-employees participated, saw a little over 200 crores worth of money essentially going to them. And it was great to see that. It was great to hear the stories of people being able to buy their first home or being able to fulfill their lives, and many of them also going on to start their own companies, saying that, hey, now I have the financial independence and I can go and take that risk. And Urban Company has certainly been a home to many entrepreneurs who then go on to start their own companies. So that's a program that I'm very proud of, the way we've structured it, and it's one that we continue to invest in. We want to keep investing in it for perpetuity.
You know, I know for many of the students here in the room, you're a role model, but you talked about Naveen being the initial role model for you when you got started. But let me end by asking you, who do you look up to today? Which are the companies that you respect and admire? And, you know, is there anyone in specific that you would like to emulate in your style of working?
With the one individual that I have, I wouldn't say seen in very close quarters, but seen from some distance as part of my work in CII, but I truly admire is Mr. Uday Kotak. I think he has built a franchise in a bank that is truly outstanding. And to do it in one generation, and the quality of talent and the kind of ownership that that talent takes is remarkable. And also the degrees, the integrity and the sincerity with which he has built that institution. And when I saw him work, he was a CII president when I was still on the National Council. I was on the National Council with him. The sincerity with which I saw him work at that age, somebody who's achieved everything in his career, the sincerity with which he would advise government on various policy matters. And I think he would have gone on and on had it not been for the RBI clause, which requires you to resign after a certain number of years. Certainly somebody that I, as an organization, I think Kotak Mahindra Bank is an organization I truly respect and admire. As an individual, I think Mr. Uday Kotak is a standout individual.
So I'm going to ask you to leave this young audience and those who are watching us on TV and online, with your life lesson that you'd like to share with them, the one thing that continues to drive you today.
Well, I would just say, play the long game. It's very important in whatever we do in life to have long-term thinking and potentially even long-term greed. In a world where a lot of people are short-term greedy, it can be a significant competitive advantage to be long-term greedy. So really think long-term. Think not 1 year or 2 year, but think 8 years, 10 years, 15 years. Because when you commit that kind of time window to any pursuit in life, you don't have to be the most talented. You don't have to be the most gifted. Just by sheer time on your side and the number of people who will naturally fall off, you will maximize your chances of success. So think long term. And I think I admire many, many, many things about this generation. Certainly they have a value system that is of a higher order than my generation or the previous generation. But one of the things that you have to be watchful of is the number of distractions that you have, which can actually make your thinking short-term. And just given the barrage of information, social media, accessibility to everything, we can lead lives with a very short-term outlook. And if you can actually flip that and start thinking very long-term in all your pursuits, if it's a hobby, don't think about it from a 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. If it's fitness, think about it as a way of life. Think about it for the rest of your life. So almost if you can think about your pursuits with a horizon as though this is what you have to do for the rest of your life, and how would you go about doing it, it will change the game for you.
Well, be mindful of instant gratification and play the long game. It is a marathon. Abhiraj, many, many thanks. We wish you the very best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us here this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Abhiraj Pal of Urban Company.
Thank you so much, Abhiraj. Now, let's shift gears and talk about some of the incredible women who are driving innovation in India. They say behind every successful man, there is a woman. Well, in the world of tech, it's clear that women are leading the charge. Today, trying to build a tech company without women is well like trying to build a car without wheels. You know, it won't go that far. So, without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Seema Goyal, VP HCL Tech, Anuradha Acharya, CEO Map My Genome, Neha Singh, Founder Chairperson and MD TrackScan, and Saranya P, Director Agniban Sorted. These women are going to share their insights and experiences, so put your hands together and give these women a huge round of applause.
Well, what a fabulous panel we have here. We've got 3 IITians on the panel today, IIT Bombay, IIT Kharagpur, and IIT Madras. So 3 IITians. And here's a special IIT Delhi connection. Seema's daughter is currently studying at IIT Delhi. Where is she? She's somewhere here in the audience. So what a proud moment it must be for you, Seema, to be here speaking at IIT Delhi with your daughter watching you. But ladies, it's fabulous to have you. Saranya, I'm going to start by talking to you, and I'll come to each one of you to talk to me about your stories. Let's start by talking to you about your journey at IIT Madras, because that is where Agnikul was also incubated. But that's not what you wanted to do. You didn't want to get into the business of space. Tell me how that happened for you.
Yeah, thank you for, first of all, having me here and organizing this event. Okay, my journey, actually, I was born and brought up in Andaman. I finished my schooling, I did my BTech there. Then I came to IIT Madras for doing my master's. I was studying civil, then I did my BTech in civil, then I did my master's in ocean technology. Then I was searching for some core job. That is when Agnikul came into picture. They came for the placements, and they had put up a very interesting profile in the portal. So they were not asking about a very difficult question, very basic science questions they were asking. So that is when I was like, okay, let's try. And that is when our founder, Srinath, he had come and he had put up a presentation, which actually brought the interest in me, saying that, okay, they're doing something new, building a private space sector that is not new. That too, when it was 6 years back, there were no private company. Other than ISRO, we could not think of any other company coming up and doing a launch vehicle company in India. I was like, okay, let's give a try there. That is how I got into Agnikul. After 4 rounds of interview, they took me.
After 4 rounds of interview, she'd got into the company. And ladies and gentlemen, today she is the director for the mission that actually saw India's first private rocket being launched. So tell us a little bit more about that, Saranya. And what, you did that all under 30? she isn't even 30. Go ahead. 30.
Okay, to talk about the mission itself, so it was an suborbital vehicle. Actually, we are aiming for an orbital vehicle. But to demonstrate what we are capable of doing, so we thought of doing an suborbital mission. So we wanted to do something different, and we started doing what our orbital vehicle is going to do, trying to extract most of it, and then we put together a vehicle which can fly at least to some extent, and it can also demonstrate all the technologies which we are trying to build in India. So that is how the mission started. It was almost 2 years, a lot of people's hard work, everything put in together. We were like, yeah, I think it's my founders who found that, okay, if they gave me an opportunity to be the vehicle director for the mission. So it was a huge learning for me to build. We started off the company by at least when I went in, I didn't know anything about the rocket building. So to building a vehicle which can actually fly, it was amazing.
Not just actually fly, it's actually flown. Yeah. So congratulations to you and to the entire team at Agnikul. And I will come back to you with more, but Neha, let's talk about you, and let's start by talking to you about your IIT journey and then how that happened, and then I'll talk to you about traction. But first, IIT.
So I grew up in a very academic family. So my brother is from IIT Bombay, my dad is from IIT Kanpur. I grew up in a colony which is called a Baba Atomic Research Center, in which half the people's parents are scientists. So it was a very academically driven environment that you grew up in. For me, it was, so I'm born and brought up in Bombay, and for me the criteria was that the college has to be in Bombay. So I actually only applied to IIT Bombay. Fortunately,
you only applied to IIT Bombay and you got into IIT
yes,
Bombay. Wow.
Fortunately. So I was like, I cannot study in any other city at that time. Now I love Bangalore, but at that time I was like, I have to be in Bombay, so I just applied there. And luckily, I got there and, did computer science undergrad over there. So obviously, the ratio has been skewed ever since. You started in college when you were probably a batch of 30 girls in a class of over 500 people overall. Probably very different from how you saw in school. I'm glad to see that number improving now.
Well, yes, we're all glad to see that number improving. But, as I asked Abhiraj, did you always want to become an entrepreneur? What was the startup, the seed for the startup, and when was that sown?
So for me, entrepreneurship was never the way of life. A lot of people actually grew up, say, in a Marwadi family, think that, entrepreneurship is, they're actually looking for ideas. For me, it was never the way of life. I was an investor, so I was doing my job at Sequoia Capital, investing in private markets. And that is when the idea of traction got born. So it was more the problem that I connected with, that I thought, that's interesting enough for me to dedicate my life to it. That got me started to traction. So, just to give an example, as private market investors, we would do a lot of effort to find out about interesting startups. If you have to find out about companies, say in online brands, we would actually look at hoardings, we would look at ads, you'd look at so many places to find out interesting companies coming up across India. And on the other hand, entrepreneurs are taking so much of pain in actually reaching out to investors. So there's this information arbitrage which exists in this market, and the problem is made more complex when you have to look at international ones. Whenever you are evaluating a company, you're also looking at who are the global comps of that. How is it being done in China? How is it being done in US? Yeah. So we realized that, public market has the luxury of a lot of platforms like a Bloomberg, which exists, but private markets does not have a platform. And that's how we thought that, let's build a global platform in that space.
Well, you're building a global platform in the private market space, and you've managed to go public yourself. Traction is now listed. What was that experience like for you, and what is it like being a listed company today?
So if someone would have asked me earlier when we were starting that, obviously listing is like a great milestone that you can, aspire for, but will it happen within the first 10 years of your startup journey? The answer would have been no. But it's amazing to see, I guess, what you can achieve when you're just having your heads down, and you're obviously very aware of the markets. Like IPO is a very, it's market dependent. So, obviously you as a company have to be ready, like profitable, etc. So we started preparing for an IPO when we turned cash flow positive, because we realized, we saw it from the investors' lens, that is how the public market also, really likes to see. So we started our process, and luckily, we got listed about a year and a half back. And yes, a lot of people have actually asked, how is it after being listed? So we were actually the first VC-backed company from Bangalore to be getting listed. Interestingly, a lot of companies, most of the tech-listed companies are actually in Delhi or in Bombay. Yes. And
even though Bangalore manages to capture all the headlines.
Exactly. Being home to the most funded sort of ecosystem, but still has very less listed companies. Yeah. Hopefully that will change, in the years to come. But there were not a lot of people that you could ask around, to understand how the ecosystem sort of operates. So we were thankful to have some of the mentors that we got early on. We had like angel investors like Mr. Nandani Lekni was an angel investor, Mr. Mohandas Pai was an angel investor, and just having, hearing from them, their experiences, and hearing from a lot of other mentors, how their experience was and how to prepare your company to going listed. I think that really helped for us. But I would say it's great to be listed. It brings a lot of discipline for you as a company. And if you want to continue to run this for the next decade, I think getting listed is essential.
Getting listed is essential, and we will get back to talking to you about what the road ahead looks like for Traction in a second, Neha. But Anu, let me come to you. And I've
known her for more than about 15 years now. We did our first interview way back in 2008, I think, in Hyderabad. And what a journey it has been for you, a serial entrepreneur. First, take us through your IIT days. And, Anu, as I keep asking you, I mean, for you, it must have been very, very different in comparison to what we've heard, even from Neha as well as from Saranya.
So thanks, Shireen. It's always great to come back and chat with you. So I think I came here and it was like, oh my God, I came here in 1991. 1991, that was my first year of college. I came here for Inter-IIT. So I remember this campus especially because this is one thing that I think especially the women need to hear. So I was, good in table tennis, but I became the captain because my captain dropped out. And I came here and we were playing and I won the first game. And then all the men started booing me.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And so I realized the power of mind, right? Like, I was better than the player that I played against, but I lost. And I think that was my first lesson that I learned, which is that, you might be better, but sometimes, your circumstances make you believe you're not, and therefore you lose. So I think that's one thing that everybody needs to do, and I think coming back to this campus...
We have to correct that. We have to give her a big round of applause now to make up for what happened in the past.
Yeah, but my coach also gave me gajar ka halwa, so it was okay. So I think that is my first round. I remember coming to IIT Delhi, but I won 3 other silver medals, so it was okay. It was not too bad. So I grew up a long time back. I grew up in... so I went to IITs in the 90s, which... many of you were not even born at that point. At that point, I think I really was somebody in my school days, I wanted to win the Nobel in physics. Very simple goals.
Very simple, very achievable as well.
Yes, absolutely. But once I went into IIT, I said, you know what? This is not my thing, right? I mean, you start to realize that you have to start to know who you are and what you're good at. So at that point of time, I said I want to go into... get an MBA or do get into some sort of business because I realized I was good at selling things and doing stuff and all of that. So I think that's where I discovered who I was in my second year. And then over a period of time, I think I did go to the US. I went to the university and I was supposed to do a PhD in physics. I clearly knew I wasn't going to do it, but I did it anyway. I went and joined a PhD program. Went to University of Illinois, and I think I was the first student in that batch who basically knew that I wasn't going to do a PhD, but I had written a really nice statement of purpose because clearly, that was what I initially wanted to do. And so after when I went and I was graduating, and they said, so why do you want to leave and join the business school? And so I gave them a big reason. I said, in the next 5 years, this is what I want to do. And I was actually just making up stuff. It so happened my life turned out exactly like that, right? So I said I want to start a company, I want to do something.
Fake it till you make it.
I just said it because I wanted to go to the business school, but my life actually turned out exactly like that. I went to business school, I joined a startup, and then after that I've been in the world of startups since then. So I think sometimes, maybe your subconscious gets you over there, and I think that's how I got started. And then I started Awesomum in 2000 in the world of genomics, with absolutely zero understanding of the genomics field. And today, I think 24 years later, I think I kind of know a lot more about genomics than I did in the past.
Yeah, I would imagine that to be the case, but I'll talk to you about Map My Genome and the plans now in just a second. But Seema, let me come to you. And, I want to understand from you, what was your sort of story? What was your reason for wanting to get into tech? It's been almost 3 decades for you as well. What's the journey been like for you?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, right? This question keeps coming. So my life has been pretty simpler, right? I studied in Delhi all through. When I campus placement, got into HCL, I never knew where am I going, right? It was one of the good companies known, tech was just starting, computers was new thing, we started. But I'm lucky to be part of that organization which gave such a collaborative, I will say an entrepreneur environment within the organization. You get such collaboration support from your mentors, bring up your idea, there is a lot of freedom and the handholding that you get to take your ideas forward. So we are the ideapreneurs, we call it, in HCL, and taking forward our dreams with all the support. I will say lucky to be part of that. I won't say life has been easy, right? There have been challenges. But yeah, huge support from family, children, right? They accept what you do because job requires a lot of travel, a lot of hard work. And
not just accept, I could see how proud she is of you, and that I think it is the mothers who actually inspire their children to go on and live out their dreams.
Yeah, I will give a lot of credit to my mother, my parents, both of them, trusting, because I was first generation, like Pooja, first generation professional degree holder in the family. A lot of support, and I will say confidence that, yeah, go venture. And beyond that as well, post-marriage, everything like that has worked pretty well. A lot of support, yeah, we did our things, but yes, can't happen without your support ecosystem. We did our heart into the work, we got all the support from the family, so lucky to be getting that right organization, right family, I will say, right?
No, absolutely. So. I mean, and I think very often women are hesitant to seek out help, to ask for help, and I think that's an idea and a notion that we must push back against, because this need to be seen as perfect, to strive for perfection and ensure that you can do everything all the time by yourself. I think that has been a huge penalty on women, and I think that we need to push back on this idea of perfection as well. But Saranya, I want to come back to you now, and let's talk a little bit about being the vehicle director and what that experience has been like. And I don't know how many of you know, but this is a story that we've been following, because Agnikul has been part of the Young Turks show for a while. This was your fourth attempt at launch. That morning at 7:05 when the launch finally happened, what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, so actually this was the fifth time when we were trying to attempt, actually the launch happened. And what happened is 3 times we went into countdown, and every time, and the countdown is like some 6 hours and the pre-countdown is like some 15 hours. So you work continuously, and the 2 holds which happened was T minus 11 seconds, T minus 100 seconds, it was in that range. So we were like almost there. We thought, okay, it is going to fly, and it did not. I was like, okay, maybe this is also one of them. That is what, maybe it is going back to the same thought that, okay, maybe we'll fly or maybe we might not fly. And I think the day we launched, we did not have any live, or we were like, okay, let's try this out without any publication or anything. And then eventually when the flight happened and I am seeing it fly, and seeing it fly how it is supposed to fly, it was like such a relief, because being inside that mission control room where we make the decisions and we see how the vehicle is performing, it's a lot of pressure, and when that happened, I think that is the most relieving moment in my life.
Yes, I would imagine that there must have been a collective sigh of relief in that room, in the control room, as you saw that rocket take off. But you talked about the fact that this was the 5th attempt, and you were so close, T minus 10, and then to have to pull back. How do you, from a situation like that, regain the confidence, regain the conviction, regain the belief, and come back to your desk the next day?
I think it is the teamwork, I would say. The number of times we are doing this, we come back a little stronger. We know that where we have missed it, and we try to correct that and come back. And it is a lot of fatigue, because you have to undergo a lot of same countdown again and again. But the team never said that, okay, we need a break, or we'll go back and come back. It was always like, let's do it. Let's give it a try again. Let's try it again. Because we all knew that there is no way of going back, because it's some 200 people's hard work put together for 2 years. So we knew that we have to do it. I think the team has been a great support, and every time try we do, everyone was like, okay, let's do it. Let's try it again. So I think
there's no going back, and yeah, that's what I want to address with you. As we heard that from Abhiraj as well, that this is a marathon. You're in it for the long haul. But there are challenges. There are moments in the life of an entrepreneur which can be fairly lonely as well, and it gets lonelier as you get to the top. What has that been like for you? How do you deal with that? How do you sort of pick yourselves up when the days are tough, times are hard, and say there is no looking back? Have there been points like that?
For sure. So entrepreneurship is a lot of highs and lows. And with all the right amount of talent that you have, you can never ensure success, because a lot of things is also dependent externally, right? So, you know, you have a very talented team, you put in the right amount of effort, but a lot depends also on everything else. People have seen COVID, right? So that's like, you know, a COVID kind of event can also happen, but there are a lot of other things which happens in your market. So I think entrepreneurship is a journey of highs and lows, and whatever you have, you know, you're probably, you have all the right ingredients, you may have the right team, you may have the right funding, etc. But there will be highs and lows. I think what keeps you going across all these highs and lows is the long-term vision and what you're really excited about. So for instance, one of the things that we are really excited about is you know, like attraction, building a large global data platform out of India. So if you look at across all asset classes, be it public markets or be it real estate or be it healthcare data, right? Like most of the companies are either headquartered in New York or London, and a lot of the work actually is done in India.
Yeah, the back office work is done in India. Yeah.
For a lot of the large, even public market data companies, the biggest office is actually in India, and you know, not in US. And that continues to be for a lot of other sectors. And you know, now you have a lot of talent, you have a lot of tech talent, you have a lot of analyst talent. So it's time that you can also create a global data company out of India. And private market is a very upcoming asset class, I would say. You know, and India is a great ground for that as well. So it's a very good asset class, which is, and you know, now you also have good technology. You have AI, which you can actually use to be able to synthesize a lot of unstructured data to be able to do that. So I think that vision of creating a global data platform, and we can do that in our lifetime, I think that is what keeps you really excited and focused through the highs and lows.
So what's the next target that you've set for yourself? I know that that is the long-term vision and the long-term target, but what's the next immediate target?
I think just continue to execute. Right now, what is happening in our market is, if you look at from the government side and from a lot of other sides, there's a lot more data about companies today becoming available. You know, be it labor data, be it GST filing data, be it, you know, so many other types of data which is becoming available. You know, how do you basically take all these unstructured data, you know, put it into a form that people can make business decisions out of it and investment decisions out of it? I think that's our goal. And today we have customers in over 50 countries, so that problem is a little bit, you know, multiplied by the fact that you are having to deal with filings which are in non-English language, data which is in non-English language, you're serving customers which are non-English speaking. How do you actually do that and make a platform to be able to, you know, synthesize it and make investment like enterprise-grade data through that?
I'll talk about the India global revenue mix in just a second, but Anu, let's talk about Map My Genome now. And you know, as Neha said, that we're entering an era where AI is the sort of big bet. It's the big hope on the kind of transformation it can drive across different sectors, including genomics as well. And I know that you've, for a long time, been talking about the need for personalized solutions. You know, what is the trajectory now as far as the company is concerned as we enter this AI era?
Sure. So I think I'll start with what Pooja said, and she was talking about our increased lifespan, right? I mean, and ultimately that's what it is, right? You're looking at how do you use information about yourself to live longer, to live better, and to look better, right? I mean, those are the kind of things that people want to do. I think pretty much everyone, especially as they start growing older, wants to look younger. I think those who are sitting in the audience probably want to become old as soon as possible, but all of us who are on the other side want to become young.
They'll regret that in a few years.
Yes. But I think genomics can basically help you in the longevity space. That is one. The second is to help understand just where you came from. And I think that's another fundamental question that a lot of people ask, like, where did I come from? You know, do I have a little bit of French DNA, do I have Rajasthani DNA, and all those kind of things, right? But the other, I think, more important aspect, and I think you mentioned that, is that when you look at the whole world of personalized medicine, what might work for me might not work for Neha or for you. And I think that's where what medications work for you, what food works for you, what kind of beauty products work for you, all of that is determined by genetics, right? I mean, a lot of that is determined by genetics and epigenetics, which also now you can sort of decode. So in the last 20-something years that we have been there, it not only has helped us understand what you are born with, but you also see what effects the lifestyle has on your DNA, right? So how how are the methyl groups added, what is happening with your actual, histones and many other things. So I think one is that genomics is transforming everything, whether it's agriculture, whether it's healthcare, whether it's skincare or anything else. So I think I'm glad I was one of the earliest to be there. And AI has
clearly you had the first mover advantage.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, AI in our space has always been there. First we called it machine learning and now we call it AI. But we always needed machine learning because, how do you actually get the large amounts of data? Like for each individual, you're looking at amounts of data like 90 GB or more. How do you actually make sense out of that? So you need that sort of compute, you need that sort of power. And I think that's where this has really helped in transforming and making it a lot more affordable, a lot more accessible, because your costs have come down. And so what used to be $1 billion, today you're getting it in sub $100. So I think that's what is exciting, that it's become available to everybody and anybody. And it's also available to them in their homes. So people can order a test kit and it comes. So I think
access is the big one.
Accessibility, affordability, and the fact that the science has become a lot more granular, and you can distinguish between specific populations. And I think as we go forward, as more science gets, it evolves more. I think what we'll start to find is that we'll have a very specific formulation for Shireen versus Neha versus me or Saranya and so on. So that's what is exciting, that ultimately we are getting to that point where it's not just about knowing yourself, but it's also about saying how do you actually use it in every form of life.
Well, the true power of personalization that you were talking about. But Seema, let's talk about what you're doing at HCL at this point in time now to try and ensure that you A, plug the leaky gap, but B, also prepare the workforce and specifically the women as far as upgrading them on skills, getting them ready for the kind of tasks that they are going to have to do now as we move more and more into an AI era.
Absolutely. So I've been working on telecom networking products, data centers, what kind of technology that goes in. This is an industry which has gone through humongous churn, right? A lot of growth in terms of a lot of innovation in this space. There is infinite opportunity, right, from an innovation perspective, which has happened. Currently, working on a sustainability and data center observability products, how digital telcos are going to go digital, right? How do you support telcos go digital, offer digital services to their enterprise customer? That is what we are focusing on. One interesting thing which I want to definitely talk to our young entrepreneurs here, Gen AI, right? Pushing it away will not work, right? If we keep doing the things the way we've been doing 20 years back, that's not going to work. So technology is going to evolve. The standard way of churning out code, building your designs, converting your idea to a product cannot be traditional. So fully leverage Gen AI. Go ahead, there is a lot that it can offer. How you use it and make Gen AI success, it'll be a key to your careers. And that is one area that we are focusing on. That is a way of living for us.
There was a provocative statement that was made by Chris Wood, a global investor at Jefferies, who said that as we move into an AI era, it's probably a better bet to be a plumber than to be a coder. Do you agree with that?
See, this is like quite a bit of, I will say, things said about Gen AI. Is it going to take away my job, your job? No, just use it, right? Because this is a platform, right? This is giving you a lot of power, right? Do you want to cut the wood the way it was cut 100 years back, 200 years back? Doesn't make sense, right? It is giving you a lot of power in your hand to do things faster, right? And convert ideas into products. Simple things, right? Today, we are working with a lot of government of India initiatives, crop yield production, soil analysis, right? A lot of things can be done much faster if you put some of these tools. Otherwise, to build one simple product, it used to take a couple of years. Right? So that's one area which...
So the competitive advantage and the competitive strength will also be on how quickly people actually adapt and adopt the tools that are now available, and specifically Gen AI, as you were pointing out. But Saranya, I want to come back to you. The mission for Agnikul is to create the Uber for satellites, not just here in India, but offer that as a service to the world. What has been the hardest part of realizing that dream, realizing that aspiration? And is there a role model that you look up to? I mean, who inspired you to be who you are today?
Yeah, actually, regarding the Uber part, basically we are trying to target a market which is for a smaller satellite. Many of the satellites maker nowadays, since the technology is coming, the satellites are shrinking, and generally the vehicles which we have outside in the market are like a big satellite place. So it takes a longer time for the smaller satellite to wait for the bigger vehicle to be built and to go. So that is where we are targeting. Regarding the inspiration, I think I would again say from the team only. I have been, there are already in ISRO, if you can see, in Chandrayaan mission, in Mangalyaan mission, lot of
women.
Yeah, powerful women are there. I think looking up to them and seeing that how they are able to do it, then also hardware interests me, so to build something new, it's always exciting. I think those things keep me going, and that is how the mission.
Well, we wish you the very best of luck, Saranya, with that. Neha, I want to ask you, a mentor or someone that inspired you to be who you are today, and what is the message that you'd like to leave this young audience with?
So I think in terms of inspiration, a lot of people, I would say, just probably my world has been startup founders, I would say. When I was investors, either to actually convince them to sort of take venture capital, and when you are building a platform, you're tracking all the startups, so, that has been the world. So I think those are probably the source of inspiration. And today it's amazing to see, people starting very young, people starting in deep tech, right? Agnikul is a great example. I think 5 years back, if someone would have asked me that would India produce space tech companies, the answer would have been no. Would India produce EV companies? The answer would have been no. But I think now it's just amazing to see those, and those probably continue to sort of inspire you as as founders yourself. And the one message that I would probably give to everyone is one is it's a great time to start. And India is a great place to start. Like even if you are going, outside to do your education, etc., I think come back to India. India is a great place to start right now. I spent the first 4 years, after Stanford. So Traction was actually started, in US. Not a lot of people knew. All the customers were there. But right now, our entire base of 700 people is actually in India, and we sell to people across 50 countries. So I think it's a great time to start in India. And
so it's a great time to start up, and it's a great time to start up in India. That's the message coming in from Neha. Anu, your message as well as the target now as far as Map My Genome is concerned.
So actually I started first in the US and global. So we had acquired 3 companies. We were in Ossimum, we were all over the globe. And then we started Map My Genome about 11 years ago. We were primarily in India, and now we are expanding. So we are now looking at, also looking at the North American and other markets, because I think it's time that we expand our wings and fly further. And there is a large market. I think what was interesting was that a lot of the companies outside of India, they actually raised a lot of capital, and many of them couldn't get to the point where they are. So I think there is a fantastic opportunity for us, because we've learned how to be very, very efficient, thanks to the fact that you can't raise capital easily in genomics in India. So I think that made us a very efficient company, and I think that gives us an opportunity now to look at companies overseas.
Well, and that's an important lesson as well. Sometimes too much money actually leads to problems that you don't want to have to deal with. So making use of the capital that you have teaches you to be a lot more efficient. Seema, I'm going to close with you. What is it that you would like to leave this young audience with?
Yeah, so I think I want to give a cheat sheet, right? So what I have learned from my leaders and what I practice, I think 4 things if I have to give you. 1, believe in your strength, right? What is your strength? Carry that, right? It is your deep technical knowledge, your perspective, because that's where the new ideas generate, right? So keep focusing on that. That is one thing that will give you a purpose. Second thing is networking, right? Network with people whom you come across, building the network where you can share your ideas, express them, trash them out. That is one thing which is going to be very, very helpful as you go ahead. Third thing, if I will have to say that, keep learning, right? Our industry is about change. So it's a lot of innovation every day. Even actually sometimes it is impossible to catch up with everything. So keep learning. Wherever is an opportunity, learn it, right? And the last but not least, resilience, right? Don't get disheartened by a failure, right? Failures will happen, learn from it, move on, right? That's give you actually a way to go forward, how to not make that mistake again, right? Learn that. That is 4 things which I have followed personally in learning from my organization, how I have been mentored. So I will share that with you. Maybe you want to try.
Well, I think that is the perfect cheat sheet to close this conversation on, and great life advice, very pragmatic and practical solutions. I think I cannot underscore the importance of resilience. You have to learn to pick yourself up. There are going to be tough times, but you have to learn to pick yourself up, not give up. Maybe find the next thing, try, give it your best, and at the end of the day, find the people that you enjoy making that journey with, because I think that is important as well, that you find a connect with the people that you work with, the people that you envision an idea with. And finally, you know, as Abhiraj said, and as we heard from Hitendra as well, have the humility and the gratitude, have the humility to accept and acknowledge your mistakes, and have the gratitude to also acknowledge the people who may have been part of your success. Ladies, many, many thanks for joining us here. We wish you the very best of luck. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you.
Well, wow, what a powerful panel that was. Thank you so much, all of you. This has truly charged the atmosphere of the place. It's like you've really cracked the code to gender parity, or at least given us a really good blueprint. Moving on, they say necessity is the mother of invention. And let's face it, navigating everyday traffic on a daily basis is a pretty big necessity. So it's no surprise that we're seeing some incredible innovations in the transportation space. And who better to tell us about it than Mr. Puneet Goyal, co-founder of Blue Smart. Puneet has raised a whopping $24 million for Blue Smart and has invested nearly $100 million in sustainable energy, leading Blue Smart's growth from a fleet of 70 cars to over 2,200 charging stations, while championing gender inclusivity by onboarding 500 women drivers and partnering with the ASDC for skill development. Let's give him a warm welcome as he takes us for a ride into the future of transportation. Mr. Puneet Goyal.
Fascinating to be here. So just a disclosure, me and my co-founder Anmol, we didn't make it to the IIT. We didn't make it to IIT Delhi or any of the IITs, but it's a massive, massive opportunity to join us in our growth journey. We have a lot of IITians and a lot of colleagues from IIM who are at Blue Smart. I'll take this forum today an opportunity to share a small journey, since Shireen shared that you have to share real anecdotes of your life. So I'm going to share a little story of my life, which is all about failure, tons of it, some curiosity and lots of opportunities. So many years ago, on 4th of July, 1984, that reveals my age, I just turned 40. I was born in a very small place called Baguihati. It's in North 24 Parganas in West Bengal. And I grew up using public transport all my life. So we didn't have car. My family didn't have a car. So we traveled all the years when I went to school and college. I used public transport. And that got me thinking about safety. And safety was something that we never spoke about in India. And safe and reliable transport was always missing. So that's my Calcutta story, and I'll keep it there. Life changes with times, and I shifted to Bombay, for better reasons. And I went to college. I went to Sydenham, then to London School of Economics happened, and Aston University happened, where I wrote a dissertation on clean energy. And I got really focused about, an opportunity to decarbonize the energy landscape. And I started my first venture at the age of 24 when I founded my first manufacturing company, and we used to manufacture solar panels. So it was, it was after my grandfather. The initials were PLG, so it was known as PLG Power. And that factory ran from 2008 2008 until 2012, we used to manufacture solar panels in India and export it to European Union. In very short span of time, we achieved revenues of close to 100 million euros, and the market was growing great. I was really flying over the place, and arrogance had set in, and I was like, really, okay, life changes and money comes in, and you do well, right? But then again, crazy things can happen. The market just plummeted and crashed, and I didn't know what to do. I just lost it all. I made it big, lost it all, and I had put on so much weight. I got thyroid, and my wife at that time decided that she wants to go do her MBA, and I was a very supportive husband, and she went to do her MBA at the Wharton Business School, and I used those 2 years to put my business right and put my health back in order. But when God shuts one door, he or she opens another. And I founded my second venture, PLG Photovoltaic, which then went on to build one of India's early 20 megawatt solar power plants. And that's when I happened to meet my co-founder, Anmol Jaggi, who is my co-founder today with me at BlueSmart. And that venture was set up in record time of about 4 months, which Jensol, his company, built it for me. I ran it for 2 years and sold it off to a Saudi company for $68 million. So that was a decent exit. And life comes back again in full circle. And out of curiosity, I didn't know what to do next. And I was like kind of done with solar. And I was traveling a lot to the US to meet and seek new opportunities. And in one of the chance visits to the US, I chanced upon meeting the founder of Hyperloop One, and also a very interesting gentleman called Brent Kalinikas. He, at that time, he told me he was CFO of Hyperloop One. Prior to that, he was CFO of Uber, and he had raised nearly $5 billion for Uber at nearly $41 billion valuation, etc. He was on the board of Baidu, Philips Van Housen. He was CEO of Google Clean Energy. Prior to that, EA to Bill Gates. Fantastic gentleman. And we spoke about the era becoming electric. The future could be electric. And he said, and I was doing my research at that time, and I felt also that the future is really electric. I had done deep research in the space. And to which Brent said that, look, your thought looks pretty interesting to me. And he also believes that, and believed at that time, and which actually got validated, that legacy ride-hailing platforms like Uber and Lyft, which were internet-only companies, or I would say they were technology companies, they will find it increasingly challenging to shift to 100% electric, given that they work on siloed principles of just ride-hailing, connecting driver with a customer and customer to driver, and there's a transaction that happens, and then you charge a brokerage or commission out of it. And in order to go electric, somebody had to have a born electric approach. So you'll have to think electric if you want to build a large EV company. And then we started thinking, and I started writing the founding tenets of BlueSmart, and I pitched my idea to Anmol, and he was kind enough to say that, okay, I'll fund you and I'll back you initially, and let's become co-founders. And even here, he was thinking on the same path, and his idea at that time was the future is electric, it's imminent. But what are we doing about it? Is somebody building charging infrastructure? And his idea was to build charging. But we said, okay, look, I think there is something that we could do. We can really modernize, decarbonize, revolutionize ground transportation in India. There was a need to build a better transport for tomorrow. Women find it very, very scary to take rides at wee hours in the morning. What can we do about it? Why is so much fear in the system? Why do people fear to take public transport? What can we do about it? And we said, okay, why don't we leverage the power of EVs, the benefits of unit economics and the advantages and the massive advantages EVs have to offer? And why don't we build a consumer-centric ride-hailing service empowering women and men across both genders to use a very, very reliable, consistent, modern EV fleet, and where they can feel safe. This could be game-changing, right? So if you build a consumer-centric ride-hailing platform, and for that, we had to re-engineer the supply side. And we got thinking, and we said, look, what has got us here? In the incumbent platform, the two massive ride-hailing platforms in India, largely they were built out with the premise that a driver had to own an asset. And it was the driver who decided whether you will make it to the airport or not, whether you will make it to the IIT Delhi or not, or some other forum or not. And that was something that was not right. And we said, okay, if we decouple the driver from asset ownership, we institutionalize the entire supply side. And that came from our background of building large solar projects. So we said, okay, we will institutionalize the entire supply side, create job opportunities for thousands of drivers. Today we operate nearly 8,000 plus EVs, and we have created job opportunities for about 10,000 driver partners, and about 250 of them are women drivers, although we have about 650 team members working at BlueSmart, and about 52% are women. But in terms of drivers, today we have about 250, and I believe there's a massive, massive scope for improvement here. But we are creating that opportunity for women drivers to come and drive. No stress of asset ownership, no stress of fuel costs, no stress of parking, charging, etc., etc. We believe the driver's core skill set is to drive and not own an asset. Drivers are not asset owners. They should not be owning depreciating assets. They should be only focusing on simply driving. I think that was a massive, massive differentiator. We're also trying to create a branded ride-hailing service, so we completely take accountability, responsibility of each ride, and hence safety is of essence. And nobody spoke about safety, and we wanted to create a safe environment at work. We wanted to safe environment for travel, and that is something that we have been able to do. So safety is at heart of what we're building at BlueSmart, and we want to ensure that we want to make people travel from one point to another in a very, very safe manner. But for doing such thing, you also need to invest in EV infrastructure. So there's no shying away from the fact that unlike our incumbents, we are very capital intensive, and we need to go to market all the time to raise money. We've raised till now about $140 million in equity and about nearly $250 million in EV asset financing. And we are all the time out in the market raising money because we have to also invest in EV infrastructure. For somebody to really run such large number of EVs, and I'll give you a fun fact there, you have to invest in EV infrastructure. The fun fact is, today BlueSmart operates 8,000 EVs on the roads of Delhi NCR, Bangalore, and Dubai. That actually equals the fleet of Uber in London, which is the largest EV fleet operated by Uber in any city in the world. Uber has nearly about 8,000 EVs on the roads of London, and BlueSmart has actually equaled that number in a very short span of time, despite the pandemic, despite several challenges we faced. Thank you. But going forward, we believe that the time is right for innovation. It's a huge, huge opportunity. Decarbonization of transport is critical. Two sectors that are very close to my heart and Anmol's heart is decarbonization of energy, decarbonization of transport. Both these sectors contribute nearly 50% of greenhouse gas emissions to the world every year. So it's very, very important for these sectors to be decarbonized. It's time now. India has amazing policies, some amazing groundbreaking policies like the FAME policy, which was really, really revolutionary. I think the central government and the state governments have taken head on to ensure that they change the future of India, which is absolutely clean and green. I just wanted to share my story and what we have done so far. Our motto is very simple: to ensure that you are traveling safer and you have a better quality of life. And that is exactly the same for our driver partners. We are trying to improve their quality of life. Any questions, very happy to answer. Thank you. The expansion plan is we are scaling rapidly across Delhi NCR, Bangalore, and Dubai, and there's another city which is probably coming up, we shall share more about.
Bombay.
So I'm from Bombay, and there's no shying away from the fact that we'll be launching Mumbai soon. I think that's when we complete the trinity and the real network effects, because people travel between Delhi NCR, Bangalore, and Mumbai, and with the launch of Mumbai, we will definitely hit the network effects.
Thank you so much, Puneet. Thank you very much.
That's Shireen for you. She always puts you on the spot. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Puneet. You've really charged us up all with your vision of the future of transportation. It's clear that the future is green and we're all ready to hop on board. Okay, speaking of innovations and illuminating the path ahead, let's keep the momentum going with Professor K.V. Subramaniam, former Chief Economic Advisor and ED at International Monetary Fund. Let's dive deep into India's economic landscape and get his expert insights on how gender parity can fuel growth. Please give a huge round of applause to Professor K.V. Subramaniam.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I talk to you about India at 100, I'm going to do a little bit of a flashback. And your opening chapter talks about you imagining yourself in 2047. I'm going to take you back to when you were in college as a student studying at IIT. What was the big ambition, the big aspiration, the dream that you had then?
Thank you so much, Shireen, for inviting. So really privileged to be here in campus. Many poignant moments for me when I reminded of the campus to the east, IIT Kanpur. One particular moment, so I actually come from a very humble background. My father lost his father when he was just 7 years old, and just completed school. I was the first person in my clan to go to university. So when he first came to campus, and I took him to the library, the Vijay Kelkar library there. I remember him actually being very emotional and saying, at least in my next life, I get the opportunity to study in a university like this. So that moment is something which is etched in my memory. I'll be absolutely honest, I did not even know what a chief economic advisor is at that time. If somebody said I'll be X, Y, or Z, or even executive director, I don't think even I knew what the International Monetary Fund was. But I did start reading when, the liberalization happened when I was in campus. And that's when the word IMF actually, but, it was only the word IMF. We didn't know International Monetary Fund. But yeah, it's been I'm incredibly grateful for the journey that I've had. A lot of luck and grace, I guess.
Well, a lot of luck, grace, a lot of hard work as well, and congratulations on the new book that is with the students here as well. So let's talk about the big prediction that you're making there, and it's a prediction that has a lot of shock and awe value attached to it, because you talk about India being a $55 trillion economy by 2047. We are today a $3.5 trillion economy. Yeah. No one is predicting 55 trillion by 2047.
Yes.
Why are you?
Yeah. So if, those of you who are interested, maybe if you've read the preface, contrarian predictions, especially bold ones, typically, generate a lot of incredulity. And Sherin, I'm sure you'll remember, I've actually lived through that, having predicted the V-shaped recovery during the COVID pandemic, when very few people believed it at that point in time. So let me take you through the very smart bunch of students here. I'm sure, can do mental math faster than me, but let's do a little bit of mental math. And just to make sure that everybody understands, from the economic perspective. So if you think about the rate of growth in dollar terms, we have to, take the real growth in rupee terms, add inflation, that gives you the nominal growth in rupee terms, and then you have to subtract the rate of depreciation. If it were appreciation, you add the rate of appreciation, because depreciation reduces the value in dollar terms compared to rupees. So if you assume real growth to be 8%, inflation to be 5%, 8 plus 5, 13, that's nominal growth in rupee terms at 13. Assume the rate of depreciation to be 1%, and I'll come back to why that assumption actually makes sense. But if you assume rate of depreciation to be 1%, 13 minus 1, 12%, so that's 12% CAGR in dollar terms. Now, a rule that we use, to know the number of years, rule of 72. So 12 times 6 is 72, so GDP doubles, and this rule is basically to know how many years it takes to double your money. So every 6 years, GDP doubles. 2023, our GDP was 3.28 trillion, and I'm going to approximate it to 3.25 so that we can work with some, at least first decimal. So 4 doublings over a 24-year period, because doubling happens every 6 years. So from 3.25 to 6.5, 6.5 to 13, 13 to 26, and 26 to 52. That's about 16 times. Now, this prediction will seem audacious for sure, but in my opinion, it's achievable. Let me give you one very tangible example. Let's take Japan in 1970 and 1995, 25-year period. What was Japan's GDP in 1970? It was 215 billion. Its GDP in 1995 was 5.1 trillion. So about 25 times multiplication over a 25-year period. What happened during this period? The rate of inflation from about 8% in 1970, it came down to 1%. And thereby the rate of interest came down. Actually financing became much more widespread. And what happened to the currency? In fact, the currency appreciated. Here in the assumption I gave you, actually I've assumed depreciation. The currency, I've assumed depreciation at 1%, and I'll just give you the economics behind that. But the yen appreciated from 350 yens to the dollar in 1970 to 85 yens to the dollar. So appreciation of, about 2.5 times. Now, the reason I'm being conservative in assuming depreciation. If you look at the data, historical data, from 1991 onwards, which is basically when we started liberalizing, the rate of depreciation on average has been about 3 to 3.5%. But this has been during a period when the rate of inflation in India has been 7% plus, or had been 7% plus. Since we've implemented the inflation targeting regime, actually, that is essentially requires the central bank to target a certain rate of inflation. In 2016, this was implemented. The Reserve Bank has to deliver inflation of 4% plus minus 2, so 2 to 6%. And the historical rate of inflation, from 2016 to 2024 has been exactly 5%. So inflation has declined from 7% plus to 5%. And so even if I don't assume any real appreciation of the currency, just a simple fact that, in order to keep the real value of the currency the same, the currency with a higher inflation has to depreciate more. Lower inflation will mean lower depreciation 1 for 1. And therefore, instead of a 3.5 rate of depreciation, the likely rate of depreciation of the currency will be less than 1%, because I've not talked about the real appreciation here at all. So again, as you can see, given the situation we are in now, about close to 4 trillion, it does seem audacious. But what is really critical here is 8% growth, from here on. And I'll just spend a couple of minutes explaining the economics behind that, because 8% is ambitious, but achievable.
But it's not given.
It's not given. No, absolutely not. It's not given. And, I as a fan of cricket, I'm given to using examples from cricket. So I'll, in the early 90s, and that's when we were in college, Sachin Tendulkar had, burst into the scene, and he played for a few years. And his potential was actually absolutely visible, because it, hit that famous 100 in Perth. Sunil Gavaskar at that time actually made a comment about Sachin, saying when Sachin finishes, if he does not score at least 40 international hundreds and at least 12,000 international runs, I'll personally go and strangle him. It's basically, it was a sort of a paternalistic comment about the potential that Sachin had. Now, of course, we know Sachin ended with 15,000 plus international runs and 100 international hundreds. But that did not happen just because of potential. It required enormous amount of hard work. It also required, when Sachin had the tennis elbow, injury, he had to come up with new ways of actually adapting to setbacks. I think therein lies a very important lesson. Given our growth, especially over the last 10 years, the potential is very much there, and that potential comes from past performance. And that's basically what, Gavaskar talking about the potential of Sachin. But in the next 25 years, we have to work hard, especially double down on the very good policies that have been implemented over the last 10 years, much like Sachin worked hard. And also, there will be setbacks, and us being able to actually come up with innovative solutions will be equally critical.
So let me address both those issues. One, of course, the risks potentially that we could encounter along this journey, but more importantly, where you believe we need to double down, where specifically you believe the government needs to do more in terms of pushing investments, the private sector needs to do more. What would those 3 or 4 sectors be, the 3 or 4 measures be that you would prioritize in order for us to really be able to do that 8% number?
Yeah, so let me just quickly, to speak about the drivers. And it was really gratifying to hear some of the entrepreneurs, especially if you take urban company, who's talking about, formalization. And I think that is a wonderful example of the kind of productivity improvements that will happen in the economy. If you look at macroeconomic estimates, and it's very difficult to get the extent of the informal economy precisely because it is informal, but anywhere between 2/3 to 3/4, and estimates vary, the economy is still informal. And we know very well that informal sector firms are not as productive. So the most important driver of this growth will be formalization, and the public digital infrastructure that has been put in place over the last few years actually will be a critical driver of, from the vantage point that I occupy on the board of the International Monetary Fund, I actually, lose no opportunity to remind my colleagues that this is something that, India has leapfrogged on and will be a big determinant of the formalization. So that's the first driver. Second is even our formal sector firms are still, are lagging behind global peers in their productivity. And I think they will catch up as well with innovation, with entrepreneurship, And I think today hearing, all these wonderful entrepreneurs only, redoubled my belief about this, because not only do entrepreneurs actually generate productivity in their, or higher productivity in their own firm, but they also challenge the existing incumbents. In some sense, incumbents actually, it's like being on a treadmill where in order to just stay where they are, they have to run. And I think that is an even more important aspect of, that'll be the second key driver. And of course, from a credit perspective, and I'm a financial economist, that's the, our credit to GDP ratio is 58%. If you go back about 65 years back, the world average in 1960 was about 60%. In other words, in terms of credit creation, we are, in India today, the level that the world was about 65 years back. So there's a huge runway for credit creation. I'll just give you a specific example. Take India versus South Korea. India, in 1960 had a private credit to GDP ratio of 8%. South Korea had 6%. In other words, India, we were 33% ahead. Fast forward 60 years, 2020, South Korea has a private credit to GDP ratio of 178%. We are at 58. And you can do the counterfactual. If, for instance, we had that kind of credit, growth, maybe we might have been actually not buying their Samsung phones. They might have been buying our phones. We might not have been buying their cars. They might have been buying ours. Actually, but there is an important learning, and this will actually foster growth. Now, let me come to specifically the sectors that you talked about, right? I think manufacturing, and at least 2 or 3 chapters I spend on manufacturing. That's incredibly important, from 2 perspectives. First, it is the fact that we have, very young population, and the demographic, it actually, for it to really become a dividend, social and economic inclusion, especially through good jobs, high quality jobs, is really critical, and manufacturing sector is critical for that. But also from a macro perspective, as the middle class will grow, we'll have a bigger middle class. They'll demand, they'll need not only phones, they'll basically need refrigerators, televisions, they'll basically need, air conditioners and all those goods. If you're not going to be manufacturing them here in India, we'll have to import them, and that'll have an impact on our trade deficit, our current account deficit, and then, on the overall, the external situation. So from both these reasons, it is really important to focus on manufacturing. And here I want to, I've always maintained that, some commentators, for instance, say that India missed the manufacturing bus, or maybe even will miss the manufacturing bus again. I disagree. The reason being that the reason, we did not enjoy as much growth in manufacturing is, in my view, completely because of policy failures. When you look at a manufacturing sector firm, what are the inputs that a manufacturing sector firm needs? It needs land, labor, capital, logistics, or transportation, power, scale, economies of scale. On each of these inputs, and these are what we economists call the factor markets, markets for these factor inputs actually have not been liberalized, even though we liberalized, product markets in 1991. And I'm sure you will know this. In 1991, as part of the IMF package, actually labor reforms, land reforms are actually part of, and here we are, in 2024, we're still basically waiting for the labor laws that have been passed, or subordinate legislation to be enacted. On each of these inputs, our manufacturing sector entrepreneurs face anywhere between 15 to 20% additional costs compared to their global peers because of these, the markets are not liberalized. You add them all up together, you basically see our manufacturing sector, firm compared to global peer is facing anywhere between maybe double the cost. So this is one area where basically policy needs to continue. There's been good work over the last, several years.
But it's not enough.
But that is not enough. That is not enough. We still have to, the 4 labor codes that have been passed, the subordinate legislation needs to definitely be, passed. States need to work on, and a lot of the onus for reforms needs to be on the states. Land is basically the state subject. Land is incredibly important. Land banks need to be created. Capital, and I think this is where the financial sector is really important. This is up to the, the union government, but a lot more efficiency needs to be brought in. Our public sector banks need to become more distinguished, and one of the, I jocularly remarked that, if you enter into a public sector bank, when you have to actually know which bank are you banking with. You have to step out and read the board. Otherwise, they actually look too homogenous. But we have actually they account for about 75% of the overall, banking sector. So that's too homogeneous. They need to have the unique competitive advantages. And whether it's based on geography or on the product segment, they need to develop that, and that will really help in the, in reducing the cost of capital. Good work on logistics. I think logistics costs have come down, but we need to continue working on that. Power, I think that's again, this is state subject as well. Discoms actually continue to be, many of them continue to bleed. Reforms are really critical there. And finally, on the economies of scale, this is one thing which actually, I'll give you this data. If you look at the United States versus India, and compare a firm that is 5-year-old on average versus a 30-year-old, and we have entrepreneurs here, so it's really important. Hopefully they'll remember at least this. If nothing else, they remember this fact. In the United States, if you look at a 30-year-old firm, the 30-year-old firm produces 7 times as many jobs as the average 5-year-old firm. What's that multiple in India? 1.4. 7 versus 1.4. In other words, when the firm, a new firm ages in the United States, it's producing at least 5 times as much jobs. And it's starting possibly from a larger base as well, yet producing. And this is incredibly important. Why? Because we've, a lot of the regulation we've had, and that is, good part of that is from, a relic of the socialist past, where we provide perverse incentives for firms to basically continue remaining small while they age, and therefore we create dwarfs in the economy. And I think this is really important because economies of scale come when a firm grows, and instead of having 5 firms which are, let's say, slightly less than 100 employees, because 100 is a threshold when the regulation really starts, the entire rule book is thrown on the firm. A firm that is 500 employees strong will have much lower average costs, and thereby, will be more productive. So so manufacturing is actually really a very important aspect of innovation and entrepreneurship. And I think the steps that have been taken in this budget, I really commend that. I want to comment on, if there's been some comment, especially on some of the, the capital gains part. Set aside, for paucity of time on the real estate part, but just look from a entrepreneurial firm's perspective. Many entrepreneurs, I think those that came here spoke, basically, it's quite likely that they might have their, net worth multiplying 10 times, or maybe even more. Now, if your net worth is multiplying 10 times, 20% versus 12.5% makes a hell of a difference, in the taxes. And because you're starting from a low base, basically marking it to inflation, which is, that doesn't make much of a difference. In real estate, it may, but from the perspective of entrepreneurship, I think that is a very important aspect, and something that I noticed actually has not gotten as much traction. I would have hoped that some of the entrepreneurs would come out and said, look, this is something that is really good.
They did. They congratulated the government on finally doing away with the angel tax, as well as bringing in parity on long-term capital gains.
Just to add, actually, I think the angel tax together with this, because you would recall when I was with the government, the angel tax was an issue that, and I'm glad that finally we've removed that, and I think it's so overall, the entrepreneurial ecosystem, I think, and this data is really important to mention. From 2004 to 2014, the CAGR for new firm creation was 3.2%. From 2014 to 2024, that number is orders of magnitude higher, about 200%. So I think that is basically revealing the kind of, entrepreneurial ecosystem we have. And, as I was listening to many of the entrepreneurs, I'm reminded of the Fairchild Semiconductors syndrome, where, firms or people who worked with Fairchild Semiconductors went on to create so many entrepreneurial firms. I think that is something that will happen in India over the next 20-25 years. People listening to, the entrepreneurs here, role models, they will get inspired and basically start, and they will themselves then mushroom more entrepreneurs. And as you can see here, these are going to solve India's problems, and make money for themselves as well. I think that is something, it was music to my ears to listen to that.
Music to your ears, and the music to the ears of those who are listening to you as well, that you believe that this is the time to start up in India as opposed to looking at opportunities outside of India.
Absolutely. I think, good that you brought this up, because when I look at, my batch from IIT, I would say, I mean, just a rough calculation, about 3/4 of my batch, are in the United States. I would guess, I have not, done the data on this, but I would guess that, today's batches, maybe even the last 7, maybe a decade, about 1/4 of the batch may actually be in the United States. And, here I want to point out, especially for this class here, think about what your salaries will multiply over the next 35, 40 years. And let's, so as I was sitting, I was just basically thinking about my first salary check, was 4,555 rupees. And academics don't get paid that well. So I'm certainly on the lower end of the spectrum. But, on rupee basis, I can say when I was actually, not giving up my sort of private sector or, salary to work in the government, I could see that my salary has multiplied, at least 100 times. And even adjusting for, for currency. So I'm sure many of my friends who actually did not choose to go into academia must have had much more. Now, when the economy is going to grow at, let's say, 10% or dollar or 12% in dollar terms, right? Over a maybe 40-year career, that quite likely in dollar terms, their salaries will multiply about 50 times. And I'm not talking about the entrepreneurs. I'm talking about those that basically will choose to be employed. In contrast, if you take the United States, which is actually, I mean, on a personal note, I would say if there's only another country that I would have chosen to live on, except India, it would have been the United States. I'm not considering any other. Using that as a benchmark, 2% growth and maybe 2%, 2.5% inflation, the salary in dollar terms are, I think people there will be lucky if over their career, their salary is multiplied 10 times. So do the math, I think, and look at the opportunity that means for people basically. So hopefully not only to those who are here, but those who are listening, and especially those who are listening, back in the United States as well, they take this message and think about the kind of opportunities there will be, if they come back to India. I think this is really the place to be. I will tell you, sometimes, because I continue to be on the roll at the Indian School of Business, I'm a professor on leave, and when we're recruiting assistant professors there, sometimes actually some of the candidates, I'm asked to sort of have a brief conversation with them. I tell them actually this, the next 20, 25 years, 30 years, this is where a lot of the research will get done. And here's where your salaries will multiply. So this is the place to be.
This is the place to be. I also now want to talk to you about the issue that we're championing here, and that is the issue of gender parity. Your predecessor had actually put out an economic survey that was pink, symbolizing the need for the government and for the private sector to focus on gender parity and for increasing the participation of women in the workforce. But, as we talk about this 8% growth number, this $55 trillion aspiration that we have for 2047, the importance, the role, the relevance of women in achieving that.
Yes. No, I think I don't remember the name of the entrepreneur who talked about the fact that, I think it was, what was his name? Abhiraj. Yes. So I think he's a junior of mine from IITK. He talked about how, if you have to cater to the preferences of, women consumers, then having those that, can think basically along those lines, I think is really critical. And I was so gratified to hear that, because that makes it a business proposition. And I think, I can tell you, if somebody observed, if you had seen me, for instance, let's say when I was in IIT versus today, it was when you were, maybe a street urchin, you might have called me actually when I was, because having my wife, for instance, and she's been such a big contributor in what I've become eventually. I think some of the soft skills actually, and these are aspects, and the ability to without getting sort of stressed, being able to manage many different things. I'll just give you one example. When I was a CA, typically, and many of the advisors, the Indian Economic Service actually are women. They would be in a meeting with me maybe at 3:30, 4 or something, and they'd get these calls actually, and they would be, because they're in a meeting with me, they would be, declining those calls. If the call comes twice or thrice, I knew this was actually either their kid or their mates calling basically for what needs to be made for dinner. And so because that's exactly what, my wife, so when I was at ISB, it's the rare occasions when she was not instructing our kids or the maid to actually say what needs to be cooked. My kids would call me up. I would be at a loss actually to be able to, I would go, ask them to go and
That's the problem, isn't it? We need the calls to be coming both ways.
I agree. No, I think, let me be very, very grateful for the kind of, intellectual horsepower that is required while you're actually at work. So the only times when my wife would not pick up, she used to manage the entire MBA, suite at ISB, if she was the dean. Otherwise, she'd basically take that call and, and instruct, because she would know exactly what was there in the refrigerator. She knew exactly. I had to, in contrast, ask what is there and then maybe suggest, right? So all I'm saying is that the kind of skills that, and especially resilience, that women bring is something that, and I have 3 generations, my mom, then my wife, and then now my daughter. She's actually pushes me on a lot of things, because we were 2 siblings. We were actually me and my brother. We didn't have a sister. So so much perspective I've gained, and I think therefore from a business proposition for an individual business and in the economic proposition for the macro economy, I think the skills that women bring, especially on the resilience front, I think are really critical. And I say this because, in my opinion, in the next 20-25 years, there will be the frequency of shocks will be higher. And therefore, being able to be resilient, and you talked about how basically you fall down, you still dust yourself and wake, get up and run again. I think that's a skill that I think women can, not only can they implement in the economy, but they actually can be really inspiration for many of the men to sort of pick up on. So overall, from a macro perspective, I think at about 40 to 45% labor force participation for the women is what I think will be, ideally if it gets to 50, great. But I think, during this period, 40 to 45% what it should be. I've covered in one of the chapters in the book as well. I think, again, it was nice to see some of the ideas resonating about the need for care. Yeah. So one of the ideas in the book is what I've called it the care BNB. Something similar to Airbnb on the care side. And here I think technology can be used. I'm an engineer, grew up in places like this, the intellectual growth. So if you think about what is the reason, and I'd be happy to hear other perspectives, but sometimes the reason women actually do not want to, let's say, have somebody else taking care is because they possibly don't have the confidence or the trust that they will, the other person will take care in the same way as they will take care. And so, but in my opinion, technology can solve this problem. If, for instance, I'm just, and I've written this, if, for instance, on my phone, let's say, either me or my wife, taking care of, let's say, either, young kids or elderly, we could at random times just pick up and say, we could see what is the caregiver doing, right? And the caregiver knows that we could be, observing at any random times. That then makes it very different, because, oftentimes in human behavior, we have this version of the, Heisenberg uncertainty principle, where, just the observation changes the behavior. And technology can therefore enable this sort of, removing this phenomenon of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle on behavior, and thereby can then engender the trust for women to actually, sort of outsource care. And this is an area where actually both the consumers and the and the suppliers actually both can be women, and the providers themselves. So this is an area where I think employment for women can be significantly generated. So I've talked about, I think we should be thinking about policy initiatives to sort of, further this as well, because that will really help in, at the macro level, some of the ideas that we've spoken about.
And if anyone decides to take the care BNB idea forward, you know who you need to send a check to as well.
Interestingly, because you brought that up, anybody wants to, because I'm never going to be an entrepreneur, but I have tons of ideas, so ring me up. I know at least, I have on my laptop at least 10 ideas written there, and happy for you to go and pursue it.
So the angel with ideas, that's what we have. But let me end by asking you, you talked about your big belief in the India growth story and why you believe that this is India's time. I'd asked you about the specific risks, and I want you to leave us with the key risks that you believe we need to be mindful of.
I think, one has to recognize that whenever, one is making a prediction about the future, and especially over a 25-year period, there can be both potential, headwinds and tailwinds, and discontinuities. I think any prediction can be, in some ways, extrapolate. It could be a non-linear extrapolation, but it certainly is some form of extrapolation from the past. So this caveat will always be there. I've written about some of the specific risks, but I think there may be others that could potentially come about which we have not even anticipated. But there could be potential tailwinds also, factors that basically aid that could come about too, which also we may not have anticipated. With that comment, I think, let me say specifically, I think there's the era of of globalization and global demand, being sort of being a big tailwind is not as strong anymore. That tailwind is not as strong. So India will have to grow during a period when this particular party is not sort of happening as much. Yeah. That's and therefore I think lessons taken from China, and I've covered that, is important, because if you see from 2007 to 2024. That includes the period when you had, negative shocks to global demand through the global financial crisis, COVID, the Ukraine war, and through this, China actually, and incidentally, I chose 2007 because the GDP per capita that China had was almost identical to India's GDP per capita today. So it's actually, on the economic front, it's an apples to apples comparison. China grew at close to 8% over that, next 2 decades periods, despite the global negative shocks to demand, by focusing on domestic policy. The two domestic engines that they really, empowered well was investment and exports. And I think both of which are really critical. In fact, China at its peak was investing about 48% of its GDP, that was the investment, the gross fixed capital formation to GDP ratio, as we macroeconomists use jargon for. So I think that there are important lessons that if we can, we have a very large consumer class, and and that will grow. So the domestic economy itself actually can be a big driver, and I think that's something we have to focus on. Therefore, good policy, salutary policy that taps into this engine and actually empowers this engine is going to be very critical. The other, I think, this is a risk factor that has to be, and I've therefore put a chapter on climate change. Yeah. I think this is an area where actually I have, because some of the commentary that I've read has not talked about it adequately. If you look at the cumulative emissions, I think it's important whenever one talks about climate change, one needs to talk about the stock and the flow of emissions. When one talks about the stock of emissions, which is what has led to some of the symptoms of climate change today, emerging economies like ours have actually been minimal contributors to that. And I think that, when we talk about international debates on this, this is an aspect that has to be tabled and has to be actually, acknowledged. Similarly, if you look at even on the flow of emissions, and, Nobel laureate from MIT actually, has a wonderful paper showing this, so Esther, writes on this, saying that even on the flow, the consumption that is happening in the advanced economies, a lot of that production is happening in emerging economies. So these are aspects. While the production of many of the, of the causes of climate change is in the advanced economies, the outcomes of that actually are being borne by emerging economies, who, as it turns out, actually don't have, very good social nets. And so it becomes not just a double, but a triple whammy. So, international conversations on climate change, need to really at least table and acknowledge. It needs to be, a sort of bring onto the table the aspect of equity, of fairness. And I think that's a, but that said, actually, while efforts on that should go on, India has to actually think for itself. And that's where I think that's an area where, again, entrepreneurial solutions can be incredibly powerful. I believe that the combination of technology, financing and policy can make a big, impact in this, and these should be solutions that are basically solving India's problems, and thereby. So these are some of the risk factors that I see. I think that the other last one related to climate change, which might be because the WHO, for instance, says that the potential or frequency of pandemics, or maybe even the intensity might increase as well. So that could be another headwind. And but as I said, over a 20-25 year period, there could be potential headwinds and tailwinds. There are some tailwinds as well, but for paucity of time, I'm not going to get into that.
Well, you've given another idea that you put on the table here for potential entrepreneurs or future entrepreneurs to consider looking at. But Mr. Subramaniam, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate your insights, your time, and congratulations once again on your new book. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for the former Chief Economic Advisor. Thank you so much.
Professor Subramaniam, thank you so much for your insights and the enlightening thoughts. Moving on, let's welcome the brilliant mind behind material magic and gender equality at IIT Delhi, Professor Neerath Ray, to the stage as the esteemed Assistant Professor of Material Science and Engineering and the co-convener for IGIS. She's about to drop some serious knowledge. Get ready to be amazed. With a huge round of applause, please welcome on stage Mrs. Neerath Ray. A warm welcome, everyone. Please.
Thank you, Shireen and CNBC, for this opportunity to talk about some of the things we do here. It's actually been very enlightening to be here and listen to all the different perspectives pertaining to parity and inclusivity. So I'm here actually as the co-convener of the Initiative for Gender Equity and Sensitization. Our Dean has already told you that it's part of one of the verticals of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And what I hope to sort of give you an overview or a glimpse of are the efforts that we've undertaken to, bridge the gap, so to speak. So one of our key mandates has been to organize sensitization workshops and to generate awareness amongst the students, the staff, and our faculty members. So that's one of the activities that we undertake. We also work to create supportive work environments. And, one of the efforts is we now have a childcare facility on campus. We've also initiated dialogues on work-life balance, and if such a thing even exists. We always look to leaders. So one of the flagship events that we've started as part of IGIS is a seminar called In Her Footsteps, where we invite IIT Delhi alumnus to, female IIT Delhi alumnus to come and talk to us, interact with our student body, and tell us about their journey, inspire us, and, lead the way. Another thing, and this is the last thing that I'm going to touch upon, is what we have done towards community engagement and outreach. And this is something that we do in close collaboration with the Office of Academic Outreach and new initiatives. So we have a JEE open house for female candidates who have qualified JEE Advanced. The idea is to give them a comprehensive overview of the holistic support system that exists at IIT Delhi. So this is another step to motivate more students or more female students to come into engineering. We have a STEM mentorship program for school girls, and that's now in its second year. It's being funded through a CSR partnership with Amex, and we hope that we can get more partners in the future. In general, we'd like to invite all of you to partner with us to sort of create more of these programs. Another thing which we've done very recently and was a little exciting for us is actually related to Wikipedia. We've all seen Wikipedia pages, but if you actually look through them closely, there was a recent article in Nature which talks about how only 19% of all pages on the English Wikipedia feature women. Okay, so there's a big gender gap even in the online representation there. So we organized a Wikipedia editathon, and this was again where we've invited school students to come edit and create Wikipedia pages to highlight the achievements of some of our female faculty members. And we hope that we can take this initiative forward to bridge the gender gap in online representation as well. So as I move forward, I hope that with the deliberate efforts across all spheres, we can create a more equitable environment and an environment where contributions from everyone are valued and recognized. So all of the efforts that we've taken have been possible. I want to take a quick moment to thank the ONI team, the IGIS team, and of course our director and our deans, who've given us all the able guidance to keep moving on. And I hope that if we all work together, we can actually make the vision of Future Female Forward a reality sooner rather than later. Thank you so much. One last comment, since we do have time, I hope that all of the students here who have attended will take this opportunity to interact with our leaders over here and make the most of this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Neerath. Wow, what a day it has been. From the electrifying talks to the engaging discussions, we've wrapped up an incredible College Connect program at IIT Delhi. A huge thank you to all our amazing speakers, enthusiastic students, and everyone who made today a memorable experience. Your energy, curiosity, and insights have truly been the highlight of the event. Before we say goodbye, don't forget to join the leaders where we can keep the conversation flowing and connections growing. It's the perfect chance to unwind, reflect on the day, and maybe even make some new friends or future collaborators. Thanks again for making this event so special. A special thanks to everyone here at IIT Delhi and our like-minded partners, presenting partner HSBC, co-presenting partner HCL Tech, associate partner ITC, FedEx, Reliance Industries Limited, and industry partner FICCI. Thank you and goodbye. Request all students and attendees to collect their snack boxes from the exit gate, which is on the left at the rear side of the seminar hall. Thank you so much and goodbye.